Small cases, let's go. Ready to go. In this video, I want to show a couple patches of what you can do with just a no coast and a 48 HP case. But why? Well, I'll get to that. So you've seen impressive, really big modular cases online and you're already drooling, right? You have a perfect case size in mind and you want to put together the most thoughtful case where you have everything you need all in one place. I get it. I have that too. I want to get a 7U 104 HP case, and I've been thinking about that size case for the longest time. But when I first started, I thought it would be silly if I were to buy a 7U case, because then I could look at the 3 modules that I had and the massive open space that I need to fill. So you're thinking that in the case, you need 2 voices at least, drums, and everything else you need. It's just not true. Though there is something really limiting about having only 3 modules, I mean, they call it a 3-module challenge for a reason, it's really tricky to actually pull what you might want to get out of just 3 modules. Depending on the modules, of course, but at a certain point, you have enough that you can sort of pull together some music or some stuff that you can at least get lost in a little bit. You'll even see people that have much bigger cases make small little focused cases so that they can either learn their modules better or optimize a workflow in a small package or even travel with them. Yeah, I think that that's super smart. Mylar Melodies did a bunch of videos just showcasing a 4U 64 HP case, and Mylar went through a bunch of different genres with that size case, and they're just brilliant. If you haven't seen them, definitely check them out. This is sort of my take on that, but with good reason, right? So why am I playing with a smaller setup? I don't really have a giant setup to begin with. It's a 4U 104 HP case. It's not a giant case. Why would I want to trim that down some more? 2 reasons. One, it's an important practice of reducing the amount of modules that you have on hand so that you can be a little bit more creative with your patching and also try and solve things with what you have versus just looking for the module that's gonna fix it for you. I mean, modular grid is great, but it's way more fun to actually play with your modular than just look at modules that you might have someday when you eventually save up enough money to get them. I mean, I'm on modular grid all the time because I'm constantly thinking about what's next, but also I spend just as much time or more time just playing in the case. I highly suggest that, especially just getting started. Just get lost in some music, you won't even think about it. The second reason is I was going to go visit a buddy and I figured I wanted to bring some modular gear along with me so that we could patch together and maybe I could teach a little bit more about modular, and I really didn't want to chance losing any luggage by having to check a bag. Keeping things small kind of allowed me to just have a carry-on in my backpack like I regularly would. So in the end, I had 2 tasks. I had to figure out what modules I was going to bring and how I was going to pack them and carry them with me. First, the modules. I did a little bit of a walkthrough here. You can watch that now. First, let's start with the O coast. Given how much it can do in a small package, it would be silly not to bring this. There's 2 different types of envelopes that you can change the shape of, one that can cycle. A great sounding square and triangle wave, a low pass gate, well, sort of, a wave folder and a crossfader, LFOs, a clock source via knobs or tap tempo. Plus, it's just a really cool instrument by itself. It's not the easiest to explain because all that's contained in one unit, but then again, having a package with a sound source and utilities offering a lot of patching made a lot of sense to bring. Once I knew that I was bringing the O-Coast, it made it easier to make decisions about what other modules I would bring as well, and how I might use them. The first module to go in the case was the ALM HPO. This is like an absolute must-have module for this setup because otherwise I wouldn't be able to hear anything. It's a headphone output module. It's really simple. It's got left and right channels in, a little volume knob, and a stereo output. I'll use this with a Y cable for headphones and a recorder, or just 2 headphones for me and my buddy. I could have used the O-Coast as a headphone out, but that's super limiting considering I would only be hearing things in mono. Next to go in the case was the Shackmat Bard Quartet. If you haven't seen the videos I've already done on quantizers featuring this module, check those up top. This is a quantizer that has a bunch of extra goodies like an arpeggio mode, track and hold, a harmony knob that allows for 8 presets of each of the 4 channels. For me, this module has been one of the most fun that I've added to my case. It changes voltages or triggers into melody that you can further manipulate for more interest, and just offers a ton of exploration to allow for a lot of happy accidents or really intentional ones. The idea of a quantizer was one of the most cool things that I came across learning modular, so I figured I had to get it in the case and show it to my buddy. The extras of this module allow it to become a stepped LFO, stepped random voltage within a certain range that you can set, and a certain number of steps. It's just an incredible module. In this tiny case, I'd likely use this as the main pitch sequencer. I could have potentially added the Variegate 4 Plus instead, but that module is a lot harder to understand and use for someone just starting out in modular because of the shared sliders. The next module that went in was the Afterlater Audio Baker. This is a clone of Immutable Instruments Peaks with the added bonus of CV in for each of the knobs with an attenuverter for each. In this little setup, I'd likely just use it as LFOs or envelopes because that's the simplest uses, and I didn't want to add another layer of complexity to explain with all the different lights for modes and stuff like that. I also don't have a ton of modulation sources. This is my only knob and CV controlled LFO that can do a sine wave. Next, I needed a module that could act as a mixer. The Happy Nerding 3X MIA can do that, mixing 3 sets of 2 inputs or 6 all at one time. It's also an attenuverter and offset module depending on patching. I think it's a really smart module, and the core experience is right in the spirit of patch programmability, and that makes it a lot of fun to explain for someone just starting out. It's also 6 HP, amazing. The Bostel Pizza was a must-have in this travel case. This is a great sounding flexible FM oscillator. Given its size, the range of timbres cannot be beat. It's a very playable sound source with an octave switcher, and it's got 3 outputs including a sub oscillator to mix in with that 3X MIA. The controls are very playable, perfect for someone that's just learning, and even if I can't adequately explain FM, it's a lot of fun. There's lots to modulate here, and in this setup I was carrying, this was going to be the second voice. The last piece of the puzzle was Ghost. I prefer modular stuff with some effects, and the Endorphins Ghost was the perfect choice. I mean, in a small case, ideally a smaller effect would be better. But in this case, both of my effects are the same size. I have the Make Noise Mimiphone, and I absolutely love that, but figured the Ghost would be a better fit for my buddy, what with the distortion, compression, and a filter. Actually, this is my only filter in this entire setup. The O-Coast has its version of a low-pass gate, which is awesome, but I think it might make a lot of sense to offer both East and West Coast flavors in the setup. This module also has a lot to modulate and sounds just amazing. I'll probably use this as an end of chain sound mangler, or just general light effects, or, just get it to do ghosty things. Anyhow, that's what I put in this 4MS 48 HP case. Yeah, it's a lot in just 48 HP, and is a lot of fun. And the big question is, how did all that stuff sound together, right? Here's a couple examples. can feel free to skip to the end. I have a couple more demos to listen to. Now that I had figured out what I was going to bring, I had to figure out how to pack it. I'd been wanting to check out these analog cases for a while. Really simple, semi-rigid cases, won't break the bank, and I figured they would be a perfect solution to carry some small synths with me. Especially because I was bringing a 48 HP case and an Ocos. For the 48 HP case, they don't really have an analog case specifically for that. There's now a dust cover that DeckSaver makes. I didn't have enough time to get that. I'm not even sure if it's quite out yet. The analog case that I went with was the one for the Digitact. It's not the perfect size. It's like a little bit shallower than I would kind of want, but it seemed to do the job. What I ended up doing was getting some foam that you can kind of pluck out areas of, and I made some padding to surround the synth. I even plucked out some areas around the knobs and sliders and put that on top, and then I just sandwiched everything closed, smushed it all down, zippered it in, and it was a pretty awesome package. There wasn't any rattling around, all the knobs and everything were pretty safe. Felt good about that one. Next was the Ocos. Typically I'd order things way far in advance, or not typically, I usually order everything last minute, and because I was doing that, the Ocos case wasn't gonna get to me in time. So Analog Cases does have an Ocos case that I'm sure is wonderful and fits it perfectly. I didn't get that one. So I had to look around the house and see what else I had that might fit the Ocos. I had kind of done this exercise previously, trying to figure out the best way to travel with my synth gear and didn't really come up with anything, but IKEA saved the day this time. I have these little cases that I use to hold like miscellaneous synth stuff. There's some on the shelf. This was basically the perfect size, and I was able to fit the Ocos in this little spot and use this foam. I did the same sort of thing around the knobs, sandwiched that on top, put the lid on, and that was an awesome little package. Of course, this doesn't have a zipper or anything as robust as the Analog Cases is. Also, I wasn't really sure how this plastic was gonna hold up, but I ended up using some Velcro just to wrap around it, and that seemed to work really, really well. So I had this small little setup. I just had to toss it in the suitcase and it was ready to go. I also ended up packing my cables in these Brainwave little bags that came with the headphone ear cup replacement things. These are great, by the way. Highly suggest if you have some lying around. They're perfect for wrapping up cables. So after I had everything packed, I was off on my trip, had a really good time patching with my buddy, and all my gear made the trip in perfect shape. Nothing was damaged, and that's a big sigh of relief. So yeah, if you're traveling with a small case, think about some foam, some IKEA bins, some analog cases, all that stuff works really well. Anyway, now that you know the whole story, let's get into some patching and hear what this stuff sounds like. It being a smaller setup, I'm not gonna pull in drums or anything like that. It's definitely enough to hang out and patch with. I've been doing some demos even after coming back, and it's been great. If you do have a big setup, I highly suggest condensing it down, playing around with something like this. If you're traveling, don't hesitate to buy a small 48 HP case or something that's compact. You'll still have a good time as you're traveling. And you'll have the peace of mind of not lugging around a big case. this patch, I did kind of make it a little haphazardly. It's a little bit more ambient than the stuff that I regularly make. There's no drums in this, obviously, but we've got pizza and the O Coast being the voices, being mixed through 3XMIA. I've kind of color coded them. So these blue cables are audio. There's also audio coming here. Pizza and O Coast are the main voices. They're both going through Ghost. Bard Quartet doing a bunch of quantizing kind of things. But here's a question. If I only have 2 channels, why am I using 4 channels on the Bard Quartet? I'm kind of using 2 channels for each in a very interesting way. So I've got channel 1 basically set up to do an ARP. So it's going through arpeggiated notes. And then I have channel 2 is basically receiving those arpeggiated notes and then limiting, basically setting the scale there. That kind of allows me to take this out, channel 1 out, and apply it over here and add it to some random voltage. What that allows me to do is not have a fixed sequence, so it's kind of nudging the sequence up and down as this offset voltage is applied. Channel 3 is sending the volt per octave out to pizza, but I'm kind of using the Bard Quartet as a clock divider, but a random clock divider. So we have channel 4 over here running an ARP, but it's running across 4 octaves in random mode. So that means it will jump to a high or low voltage, and depending on if that jump, it's basically sending a trigger into channel 3 to say, change that bass note. So it's a little bit more dynamic than just like always on the beat. And yeah, I just thought that that brought a little bit more life to this patch. I mean, already we're only just hearing the bass here of the O Coast. I'm using a lot of LFOs basically. LFO running from the Baker into the index mod here. But I mean, even that with Ghost, there's a lot there of interesting like textures. It almost sounds like big and brassy. I always love that sound. There's also a folder here, also being modulated by an LFO. Bring the reverb down a little bit. Okay, and then let's bring the O Coast in here. It's going to be more of like a pulsy kind of thing going on, or plucky. I'm just gonna jam it out and see what it all sounds like. I said I wasn't going to really bring in any drums, but I have a patch that's basically using the O-Coast as a bass drum and the pizza as kind of like a hi-hat kind of thing. So I'm just going to mess around with that. I just have clock going into here, and then as I turn it up, 3x MIA is attenuating the clock signal. Sounds pretty good. And then I turn it up more. We have the barred quartet going through an arpeggio that's driving the bass note of, or like the root note of where the kick is. And then I can change around the kick sounds. So that's it. You can do a lot with just an O-Coast and 48 HP. Who knew? Maybe that's all you need. It's definitely more than you need to get started. Anyhow, if you're just starting with modular, don't hesitate to grab a couple modules and see what you can pull out of it. You'll learn a lot in the process, and as you slowly build things up, it'll only get better. In terms of this case, I think if I had a small sequencer like the Crazy Chicken 6 Eyes might be really cool, but I obviously didn't have one of those. I didn't buy anything specific for this trip. I just pulled together what I had already. Having fewer modules definitely influences my buying decisions. I'm constantly thinking about what module might bring a lot to the case in terms of workflow or what it can do. On that note, I just got a new utility in the mail. I really want to put it in the case, so subscribe and check that out soon. Yeah, more videos to come. Cheers.